Daryl Morey is a liar, and I will never be a part of an organization that he's a part of again. Thank you, man.
The James Harden situation just got worse. For the last couple weeks, we haven't really heard anything about this whole James Harden and 76ers thing, and it's easy to forget that they were supposed to be working out a trade with the LA Clippers, but talks of that kind of fell through. Right now, James Harden is on an Adidas tour out in China, and you guys seen that first clip. He pretty much called out Daryl Morey, and this is the final straw in my opinion. I think the first thing a lot of people start going to is to make the negative headlines about him, because it has been a trend to hate on James Harden. You already seen it with Skip Bayless and a couple other people on social media. But in this video, we're not going to focus on the negative. I am a huge James Harden fan, and I'm always going to support him no matter where he's at or what team he plays for. But that being said, I can admit when I think he is in the wrong. This time, he's not in the wrong. Let's start out with the Rockets. James Harden was very close with Daryl Morey. Daryl Morey is the person who traded for James Harden back when he is a sixth man and saw a vision for him. He saw James Harden as a future superstar before he even was a superstar. Daryl Morey used to speak highly of James Harden. He even said James Harden is a better scorer than Michael Jordan. And they've always had a close relationship when James was in Houston. And I think that makes it even more sad to see what just happened today. And not just today, over the span of this entire offseason. But going back to the whole James Harden and Houston situation, when he first requested a trade, it seemed like Houston was trying to do the same thing that the 76ers are doing. And maybe this is Daryl Morey trying to prove to anyone and everyone that he's the one that can make James Harden stay. The Rockets couldn't do it, but I can do it. But the Rockets tried doing the same thing. They kinda just said, hey man, we don't want to trade you. We're not gonna get what we want back. You're a superstar and we want you to stay. James Harden saying, I don't want to stay. Back in that situation, James Harden wanted to compete for championships. And the direction that the Rockets were going with a new head coach, all of the veteran players kind of leaving, it's a very young team, wasn't a direction that James Harden wanted to be a part of. And in all honesty, I don't think players owe loyalty to any team. Look at the Damian Lillard situation. How long has he been loyal to the Trailblazers? How long has he stuck with the grind through the bad years? He gave that city life the same way that James Harden gave Houston life. Because Houston has been very on and off since the Hakeem Olajuwon days. But James Harden stepped in and became a superstar for that team and gave that city a lot of hope for championship contention. And honestly, they almost beat the greatest team of all time. Let's be honest, the Warriors with Kevin Durant. So like I was saying, I don't think players owe loyalty to any team, because as we are seeing today, there's no loyalty in general managers, and they kind of do it a little bit more dirty. So James Harden requests a trade from Houston. They try making him stay and play through it. Everybody makes the memes of the fat suit. James Harden comes into the season out of shape, quote unquote, and kind of looks like he's not really trying. He's still getting some numbers, but you could tell he just doesn't want to play there. And I know a lot of people don't like this player empowerment era, but I think it's good for the game. Because like I was saying earlier, James Harden did a lot for Houston. He actually changed the game of basketball. He changed the way that it plays, and he did a lot for that city. In my opinion, when a player does that, I think the organization should do him right if he should request a trade. So he gets sent to Brooklyn. Now, a lot of people like to say James Harden just quit on that team, and maybe it seemed like that in the moment. Why would James Harden just request to get out of Brooklyn? He has Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. And I think a lot of people kind of question this decision by James Harden and judged him harshly for it. But not that long after, Kyrie Irving had problems in contract negotiation and he requested a trade. And then Kevin Durant requested a trade. And once they both left, they talked about how unorganized and unprofessional Brooklyn's front office is. So we seen Brooklyn is a messy franchise. And that takes us to Philly, because Philly is starting to look like this might be a messy franchise too. You think about how they did Markelle Fultz, you think about how they did Ben Simmons, and now how they're doing James Harden. I think everybody knows it's not easy to play in Philly because of those fans, and we've seen that with Ben Simmons. But I think that we are at a point that James Harden can no longer come back to the 76ers. It has gotten messy. Can you imagine James Harden trying to play in front of those Philly fans after all of this stuff just happened? I'm sure there's a lot of casual 76ers fans that don't know the full depth of the situation. And I think that is the danger of mainstream sports media, because it's a trend to hate James Harden. And that's why I'm making this video, because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of negativity surrounding James Harden right now because of the third trade request. But there's been a reason for every single one of them. He can't really get a break from this. Let's talk about this Philly situation. James Harden gets traded to Philadelphia for Ben Simmons and all those other players, Seth Curry, couple draft picks, and Philly looked pretty solid the second half of that season. So there was a lot of hope going into the next season. And because of this, and also because of the relationship that James Harden has with Daryl Morey because of their past in Houston, James Harden and Daryl Morey had a verbal agreement, pretty much a handshake agreement, where Daryl was pretty much explaining to James Harden, look, we're trying to win a championship. I know that's what you want. That's what we want as an organization. And in order to do that, we want to bring in as much pieces as we can to help you guys out. And in order to do that, I think that is best that we sign you for 1 year on a player option. You take a $15 million pay decrease. And in return, I will promise that I will extend you and give you a max contract the next offseason. Now, this was a verbal agreement, a handshake agreement. James Harden and Daryl Morey had history. They trust each other. So that was the plan. James Harden took a $15 million pay decrease and only signed for 1 year on a player option so the 76ers can get some more veterans and get some more pieces to try to win a championship. James Harden was serious about winning. And even at the time, you didn't see a lot of positive headlines around this. Whenever James Harden does something good, it goes unheard. But as soon as something pops up and there's a chance for a negative headline, it's all over the place. Like I said, it's a trend to hate James Harden. Last season, James Harden had a really good season, but it was also very different for him. He was playing for Doc Rivers, a new head coach for Philadelphia. And Doc Rivers' philosophy was, James Harden, I need you to pass the ball more. I need you to be more of a playmaker. We know you could score. We've seen what you did in Houston. But for this team, I want you to get some of these young guys involved. I want you to be that playmaker. Let's try to get Tyrese Maxey going. I want you to be his mentor. So James Harden fully took on the role of becoming a strict playmaker for the Philadelphia 76ers. We've seen his scoring drop off. And guess what headlines we've seen? James Harden is not the scorer we've seen in Houston. This is not Houston Harden no more. He's washed. We've seen all the negative headlines because James Harden sacrificed everything for the 76ers to try to win a championship. He gave up $15 million. He gave up a long-term extension. He gave up a max contract, which he was definitely a max contract type of dude at that time. And in my opinion, still is today. And he changed his play style, fully trusting his new role that Doc Rivers has given to him to become a playmaker first for this team, not a scorer first. James Harden bought into this role. He led the team and the entire NBA in assists per game last season. And assists don't really mean anything. I know a lot of people say that, but James Harden's IQ and playmaking ability is the best in the NBA. But mainstream media doesn't care about that. We didn't really hear anything about James Harden last year. In fact, he got snubbed from the All-Star team. And no disrespect to Drew Holiday, but James Harden got snubbed and Drew Holiday gets in. Because James Harden is no longer the scorer that he used to be. And instead of people praising his playmaking skills and the fact that he is leading the NBA in assists per game, his team is doing very good in the East, it's James Harden's not the same. He's getting carried by his MVP center and all this negativity. Like I said, it's a trend to hate James Harden. And then we go into the playoffs. Philly looks like they're going to sweep the Nets, and then Joel Embiid gets injured. Another injury for Embiid. It seems like whatever team James Harden is on, an injury happens. Whether it's himself, Chris Paul, Kyrie Irving, Joel Embiid. It seems to be a trend with James Harden that this happens. But James Harden had a lot of great performances in the playoffs. But guess what? You don't really hear a lot about it because it's a trend to hate on James Harden in the playoffs. Everybody knows that the narrative around James Harden, the narrative that sells to the casual media, is that James Harden is a playoff choker. But without Joel Embiid, James Harden comes out in the first game versus the Boston Celtics, drops 40 plus points and hits the game-winning shot because he transforms back into his scoring role. everybody's like, James Harden is back. That's Houston James Harden. And the next game, we seen a complete different James Harden. James Harden was actually vocal about this during the season with Doc Rivers. He was having trouble deciding which mode to switch on. I can't find the balance. This is new for me. I've never gone from strictly a scorer or strictly a playmaker. Doc Rivers saying you gotta be good at both, which James Harden has always been good at scoring and playmaking, but James Harden has modes. He's either in his score first mode or pass first mode. And we even seen this when he was with Brooklyn in those clutch games versus the Milwaukee Bucks, that game 7, where everybody's like, James Harden is disappearing. He's not shooting the ball. He's scared. It seems like he just can't escape the hate. But let me not get too carried away. The Philadelphia 76ers end up losing versus the Celtics. Did he have the best game 7? No. As a Harden fan, I don't think he had a good game 7. I think he could have played better. Did he play bad in the playoffs? No. In that series alone, he had 2 40-plus point games. So now it's the offseason. You remember that promise that Daryl Morey made for James Harden? It's time for that max contract, right? But now there's rumors that James Harden might be going back to Houston. A lot of people were speculating and thinking this is just to start the negotiation process with Philadelphia. But it turns out Philadelphia didn't even offer James Harden a contract. Not even an offer, after promising him a max contract the following year if he just takes this 1 year, $15 million pay cut. I promise we'll give you that max extension next year. Nothing, not a sound. So now he's just left in the dark from that old close friend that he thought he had in Daryl Morey. James Harden wanted to go back and play for the 76ers. And as a James Harden fan, I was 99% sure that's what he was going to do. I was just waiting for that contract offer. And I think everybody else was. But it never came. Harden started to get frustrated because that promise that Daryl Morey made him, that verbal and handshake agreement that he made him the year prior, meant nothing now. All of a sudden, it's like it's just forgotten about. So now he's like, if you guys aren't going to offer me a contract, send me somewhere else. So guess what Daryl Morey does? He's like, okay, let's do that. You know, both sides win. We don't want to pay you all that money. Cool. And now we'll trade you so we could get something back. All you got to do is opt back into that contract, James. And we're going to trade you to wherever you want to go. You want to go to the Clippers? We'll make it happen. Just opt in. We're going to do a sign and trade and we're going to part ways. So James Harden and Daryl Morey have another verbal agreement. And the sad part is, once James Harden signs that contract to opt back in, it's not just a verbal contract. It is a physical contract. And under the new CBA rules, once training camp starts, if James Harden does not report to the team in the next 30 days, Philadelphia has the power to say James Harden cannot sign with another NBA team. He cannot get traded to another team. He can't even get a vet minimum contract on another team. So it seems like Daryl Morey loves that power and control that he is now in. And that is where we seen the video from this morning of James Harden calling him out. I think there's a lot of manipulation going on from the Philadelphia front office. We've seen it in the past. Things didn't work out with Jimmy Butler, Ben Simmons, Markelle Fultz, all of these players that are pretty solid players or had a lot of potential. They just failed in Philly. They were done wrong. We've seen the same thing in Brooklyn. We heard stories about Brooklyn's front office, but it's looking like Philadelphia is the same way. But it's very, very sad that it's coming from somebody that used to have such a close history with James Harden, Daryl Morey. James Harden was right. He has been lied to. He's been left in the dark. He's been manipulated. And maybe his team was doing the same thing when they were trying to spark up those Houston rumors to maybe try to get Philadelphia to negotiate a little bit more money. And maybe Daryl Morey didn't like that and there was an ego battle and he's saying, listen man, you want to try to go down this route? Let's go down this route. So maybe it's an ego battle right now, but it's time to move on. It's time to get James Harden out of Philadelphia. Because as a James Harden fan, I do not want to watch an NBA season or maybe for the rest of James Harden's career not seeing him play for another team in the NBA, because that's what can happen. Worst case scenario, James Harden might not ever play in the NBA again, because that's what Philadelphia holds under this new CBA contract. James Harden already came out and said today he will not play under an organization that Daryl Morey is in charge of. This thing has gotten messy. I don't know how it's going to play out, but we've seen the same thing with Ben Simmons when they wouldn't trade him and he didn't play. I just hope we don't see the same thing. And on another note, I really hope the same thing doesn't start happening to Damian Lillard, because they haven't traded him either. They're talking about they don't even want to trade him because they're not getting anything back. And it's kind of sad because these players gave these cities so much hope and light. The GMs and the owners just like, yeah, but it's a business. And I guess that's what it is. And that's why I always support players when it comes to contract negotiations, trade requests, because sometimes these GMs and owners, they just take advantage of players. Let me know your guys' thoughts on this situation down below in the comments. Are you guys on James Harden's side or Daryl Morey's side? Do you want to see James Harden play for the 76ers again, or do you want to see him traded, and to what team? Let me know down below in the comments. If you guys enjoyed, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. This is Zite. Peace.